You stand before Allah, you raise your hands, you bow, you prostrate, and yet when you walk away from the prayer mat, your heart still feels unsettled. There is restlessness inside you that you cannot explain. You wonder quietly, I prayed, so why am I still heavy? And because no one talks about this enough, you begin to question yourself, your sincerity, your iman, even your worth before Allah. My dear sisters and brothers, prayer is not a magic switch that turns peace on instantly. Salah is a meeting with Allah, but meetings require presence. Sometimes our bodies are in prayer, but our hearts are running, chasing worries, replaying conversations, clinging to fears, holding on to sins we refuse to let go of. We ask Allah for peace, but we do not release what is stealing it from us. And Allah, out of His mercy, allows you to feel that restlessness as a signal, not a punishment. That uneasiness after prayer is not proof that your salah was rejected. Often, it is proof that Allah is inviting you deeper. He is telling you, come with your heart, not just your movements. Come with surrender, not just words. When prayer does not calm you, it is not because Allah is distant, it is because He wants you to draw closer in a way you have not yet tried. When a person stands in prayer, the body knows exactly what to do. The feet are placed, the hands are raised, the back bows, the forehead touches the ground. These movements have been practiced for years, sometimes since childhood, and they flow almost automatically. But the heart is not as disciplined as the body. The heart does not fall into line so easily. While the tongue recites the words of Allah, the heart may be reciting a completely different story. Fears about the future, regrets about the past, conversations that never happened, wounds that were never healed. This is where restlessness begins, not because prayer is weak, but because the heart has not yet arrived where the body already is. Allah never intended Salah to be an empty ritual. He did not command movements alone. He commanded presence. Presence means that when you say Allahu Akbar, something inside you truly believes that Allah is greater than what you are carrying. But many of us say Allahu Akbar while still holding our worries tightly in our chest. We say it with our tongues, yet our hearts whisper, but this problem is still bigger. And so the prayer ends, the movements stop, and the heart remains burdened because it was never invited to release what it was clinging to. Restlessness after prayer is often the result of a divided state. Part of you wants Allah, and part of you refuses to let go of control. You ask Allah to fix your situation, but you replay the same anxiety over and over, as if your worry itself is a form of effort. You stand before the one who controls all affairs, yet your heart insists on managing everything alone. This inner conflict creates noise, not silence. It creates tension, not peace. And the prayer, instead of feeling like rest, feels like a pause before the storm resumes. Many people misunderstand khushuʿ. They think it means feeling emotional, crying, or having a sudden wave of tranquility. But khushuʿ begins much earlier than emotion. It begins with honesty. It begins when you admit to yourself that your heart is scattered, that you are distracted, that you are exhausted from carrying things Allah never asked you to carry. When you deny this reality, when you rush through prayer pretending everything is fine, the heart resists. And when the heart resists, peace cannot settle. Sometimes the restlessness comes from unresolved sins, not because Allah is punishing you, but because the soul recognizes misalignment. The soul was created to move toward Allah, and sin pulls it in the opposite direction. You may pray, but if there is something you know displeases Allah that you are unwilling to confront, the heart feels heavy. It is like trying to walk forward while something is tied around your ankle. The prayer becomes a reminder of the distance you have not yet closed, and that awareness manifests as discomfort rather than calm. At other times, the distraction is not sin, but pain. Pain that was never processed, grief that was never given space, disappointment that hardened into bitterness. You bring that pain with you into prayer, but you do not offer it to Allah. You hold it quietly, protectively, as if letting it go would make it worse. So you stand, bow, prostrate, while the pain sits inside you like an unspoken guest. When the prayer ends, the pain remains, and so does the restlessness. Not because Allah did not hear you, but because you never truly spoke to Him about what hurts. The heart also becomes restless when prayer turns into obligation without connection. When Salah is reduced to a task to complete rather than a meeting to attend, it loses its ability to soothe. Imagine meeting someone you love but spending the entire time checking your phone, thinking about other things, waiting for it to end. You would leave that meeting feeling unsatisfied, perhaps even more distant than before. Prayer is no different. Allah gives you 5 daily appointments, not because He needs you, but because you need repeated moments of return. When those moments are rushed or inattentive, the heart feels the loss. There is also the weight of unrealistic expectations. Some people expect prayer to immediately erase anxiety, sadness, or confusion. When that does not happen, they feel discouraged. But prayer is not always meant to remove the burden instantly. Sometimes it is meant to reveal it. Sometimes Allah allows you to feel your restlessness so you can finally acknowledge it, instead of burying it under distractions. The heart cannot heal what it refuses to face. And prayer, in its honesty, brings the truth of your inner state to the surface. Restlessness can also come from a lack of preparation. We rush into prayer straight from noise of screens, noise of conversations, noise of thoughts. We do not transition. We do not pause. We do not give the heart time to shift from dunya to akhirah. The body moves quickly, but the heart lags behind. When the prayer ends, the heart is still catching up, still unsettled, still overwhelmed. Islam teaches us that even small moments of stillness before prayer, moments of intention and awareness, soften the heart and invite it to be present. Another cause of distraction is excessive attachment to outcomes. You pray asking Allah for something specific, and while praying, your heart is already evaluating whether it will happen or not. You leave prayer scanning your life for signs, measuring, calculating. This keeps the heart restless because it turns prayer into a transaction instead of surrender. True peace comes when the heart trusts Allah's wisdom more than its own desire. When that trust is weak, the heart remains tense, even in worship. Sometimes the heart is restless because it has not been nourished outside of prayer. Salah is central, but it is not isolated. A heart that spends the entire day consuming negativity, indulging in comparison, drowning in distractions, and neglecting remembrance will not suddenly become calm in 5 minutes of prayer. The heart reflects what it is fed. When it is deprived of dhikr, reflection, and intentional connection, prayer feels like an interruption rather than a relief. Restlessness after prayer is also common in people who are very hard on themselves. They enter prayer already feeling inadequate, already convinced they are failing Allah. Instead of seeing prayer as a mercy, they see it as a test they are constantly failing. This mindset blocks peace. Allah does not call you to prayer to expose your weakness, but to carry it for you. When you stand before Him with shame rather than hope, the heart tightens instead of softening. There is a deep difference between praying with fear alone and praying with hope. Fear without hope creates anxiety. Hope without fear creates negligence. But when fear and hope walk together, the heart finds balance. If your prayer is filled only with fear of rejection, the heart remains restless. If it is filled with hope in Allah's mercy, even while acknowledging your shortcomings, the heart begins to breathe. Sometimes Allah allows restlessness to remain because He wants you to change how you pray, not whether you pray. He wants you to slow down, to understand what you're reciting, to listen to your own words as if they are being spoken for the first time. When you say, "You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help," do you hear yourself? Or do the words pass without touching the heart? A heart that does not listen cannot be comforted. It is also important to understand that peace in prayer grows over time. It is cultivated. Just as the body becomes stronger with consistent effort, the heart becomes calmer with consistent presence. One distracted prayer does not define you, and one restless moment does not mean failure. The heart learns through gentle persistence. Each time you return, even imperfectly, you are teaching your heart where it belongs. Allah is not distant when you feel restless. He is close, closer than you imagine. That discomfort is often a sign that your heart knows it was created for something higher than constant worry, constant control, constant noise. Prayer exposes the gap between what the heart is carrying and what it was meant to carry. And until that gap is acknowledged, the heart will remain unsettled, searching, yearning, restless. When you stand in prayer and ask Allah for peace, you are doing something deeply human. You are admitting need. You are confessing that you cannot carry life on your own. But at the same time, many hearts are still gripping tightly to control. This is where the quiet struggle begins. The tongue says, "Oh Allah, help me," while the heart says, "But I will decide how this should happen." This inner contradiction creates restlessness, because the soul was never designed to live between surrender and self-management. Salah is an act of surrender before it is an act of request. Every position in prayer is teaching the body and heart to let go. When you raise your hands, you are symbolically throwing the world behind you. When you raise your hands, you are symbolically throwing the world behind you. When you bow, you are acknowledging your smallness. When you prostrate, you place the most honored part of your body on the ground, admitting that you do not stand above Allah's will. But if these movements are performed while the heart is still holding on to outcomes, expectations and timelines, the lesson of surrender never settles inside. Many people believe that worry is a form of responsibility. They think that if they stop worrying, they are being careless. But worry is not responsibility. It is resistance. It is the heart's refusal to accept that Allah may choose a path different from the one you imagined. You pray for relief, but you rehearse worst-case scenarios. You ask Allah to take care of matters, but you check on them obsessively, as if vigilance itself will change destiny. This creates exhaustion, not peace, because the heart is trying to do a job that belongs to Allah alone. Restlessness after prayer often comes from this silent tug-of-war. On one side is faith, calling you to trust. On the other side is fear, demanding guarantees. And because guarantees are never given in advance, the heart stays tense. True surrender does not mean you stop caring. It means you care without trying to control. It means you place effort where effort is required, and release outcomes where release is required. When this balance is missing, prayer feels incomplete, as if something was left unresolved. Sometimes the heart struggles to surrender because it has been hurt before. Disappointment teaches people to protect themselves. They learn to rely on their own planning, their own strength, their own vigilance. Trust becomes risky. When such a heart stands in prayer, it wants Allah, but it fears vulnerability. So it asks cautiously, holding back, bracing itself for possible disappointment. This guarded state prevents peace because peace requires openness. A heart in defense mode cannot fully rest. There is also the belief that surrender means passivity, that if you truly trust Allah, you should not feel pain, sadness, or concern. This misunderstanding makes people ashamed of their emotions. They suppress fear instead of offering it to Allah. But surrender does not erase emotion, it redirects it. You are allowed to feel afraid, but you are invited to place that fear in Allah's care. When fear is hidden instead of handed over, it festers. When it is surrendered, it softens. Prayer becomes restless when it is treated as a place to demand outcomes rather than a space to submit. You enter prayer with a mental list of what must change for you to feel okay. Your heart is negotiating rather than trusting, and when the prayer ends without immediate answers, frustration sets in. But prayer was never meant to be a negotiation table. It is a place of alignment where your will slowly bends toward Allah's wisdom. The heart finds it difficult to surrender when it believes it knows what is best. Knowledge, intelligence, and planning are blessings, but they can become obstacles when they turn into arrogance of certainty. You plan so carefully that any deviation feels like failure. You ask Allah for help, but only if He agrees with your plan. This conditional trust keeps the heart on edge. True surrender begins when you accept that Allah sees what you do not, knows what you cannot, and arranges what you would never think to arrange. Restlessness also grows when people confuse surrender with resignation. They think letting go means giving up hope. But surrender in Islam is full of hope. It is trusting that even if the outcome is not what you asked for, it will be what you need. This trust does not come instantly. It is built through reflection, remembrance, and repeated reminders of Allah's past mercy. Without this foundation, surrender feels like loss instead of relief. The ego also plays a quiet role in restlessness. The ego wants credit. It wants to feel in control, capable, strong. Surrender threatens this identity. When you truly rely on Allah, you accept your limits. You admit that you are not enough on your own. For some hearts, this admission is uncomfortable. so they perform the prayer but resist its deeper message. The body submits, but the ego stands firm, and the heart feels the tension between them. Another reason surrender feels difficult is the pressure of timing. You want peace now. You want answers now. You want clarity now. But Allah works on a divine schedule, not a human one. When the heart is impatient, it experiences prayer as waiting rather than resting. Impatience turns worship into a countdown. Peace cannot settle in a heart that is constantly checking the clock of destiny. Surrender also requires consistency. One prayer of trust does not undo years of self-reliance. The heart has habits. It returns to what is familiar. If worry has been your coping mechanism for years, trust will feel unfamiliar at first. The heart may resist, even rebel. This does not mean surrender is failing. It means the heart is being retrained. Just as muscles ache when used in new ways, the heart aches when learning to let go. When you leave prayer feeling restless, it may be because you asked Allah to carry something but took it back immediately. You placed it down for a moment, then picked it up again out of habit. Surrender is not a single action. It is a repeated choice. Each time the worry returns, you gently return it to Allah. Over time, the heart learns that it does not need to hold on so tightly. Peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from trusting the one who controls it. Salah invites you into this trust 5 times a day, not to burden you, but to free you. When surrender slowly replaces resistance, prayer begins to feel less like an effort and more like relief. The heart stops fighting unseen battles and starts resting in Allah's care. Sometimes the uneasiness that lingers after prayer confuses people. They expect calm, but instead they feel exposed, sensitive, almost unsettled. And because they associate peace with acceptance, they quietly fear that this feeling means Allah is displeased with them. But often, the opposite is true. That restlessness is not rejection, it is invitation. It is Allah gently drawing the heart closer, asking it to move beyond the surface and enter a deeper relationship with Him. Allah speaks to hearts in many ways. Sometimes He grants immediate tranquility, and sometimes He allows discomfort to remain. Not every spiritual signal feels pleasant. Just as physical pain alerts the body to what needs attention, spiritual unease alerts the soul to what needs nurturing. When prayer does not bring instant relief, it may be because Allah wants you to stay longer in reflection, to listen more closely to what your heart is trying to say in His presence. Many hearts are accustomed to living on the surface. They manage responsibilities, maintain appearances, and function efficiently, but they rarely slow down enough to notice what is happening inside. Prayer interrupts this pace. It creates a moment of stillness where the inner noise becomes audible. When the heart is suddenly aware of its own emptiness, longing, or confusion, that awareness feels like restlessness. But awareness is the first step toward healing. Allah does not heal what remains hidden. Sometimes the invitation is toward sincerity. You may pray regularly, speak the right words, and perform the movements correctly. Yet Allah wants more than correctness. He wants truth. He wants you to come as you are, not as you think you should be. When prayer stirs unease, it may be Allah asking you to stop performing and start confiding. To stop presenting a polished version of yourself and begin speaking honestly about your doubts, fears, and exhaustion. The heart often resists this invitation at first. Vulnerability feels uncomfortable. It feels safer to stay within familiar routines than to open deeper layers of the soul. So when prayer begins to peel away those layers, the heart becomes restless. It's standing at the edge of something new, something more intimate with Allah, and intimacy requires courage. There are times when Allah allows restlessness because He wants you to change how you connect with Him. Not because your connection is wrong, but because it can grow. Just as relationships evolve, your relationship with Allah evolves too. What once nourished you may no longer be enough. The unease is a sign that your heart is ready for more reflection, more understanding, more intentional presence. Sometimes the invitation is to slow down. Life trains people to rush. Even worship can become hurried. When Allah allows you to feel unsettled after prayer, it may be because He wants you to linger, to sit with the feeling instead of escaping it, to remain on the prayer mat a little longer, not asking for anything, just being present. Stillness can feel uncomfortable to a heart used to constant motion, but it is in stillness that closeness grows. The restlessness may also be an invitation to reevaluate priorities. Prayer aligns you with truth. When your life is pulling you in a direction that contradicts that truth, the heart feels tension. You may not consciously recognize the conflict, but your soul does. The unease is not meant to shame you. It is meant to guide you. It is Allah, reminding you that peace does not live where values are compromised. At times, Allah uses restlessness to awaken longing. Longing is not weakness, it is a sign of love. When the heart tastes closeness to Allah, even briefly, it becomes aware of how much more it desires. That awareness can feel like restlessness. The heart is no longer satisfied with distance. It wants depth. It wants meaning. It wants to belong fully to Allah. There are moments when the invitation is toward repentance, not because Allah wants to punish, but because repentance cleanses the heart. When prayer stirs discomfort, it may be highlighting areas that need forgiveness and release. Not to overwhelm you, but to free you. Allah does not expose faults to humiliate. He exposes them to heal. Restlessness can also be a call to knowledge. You recite words in prayer, but perhaps you do not yet understand them deeply. When the heart senses meaning without clarity, it feels unsettled. Learning the meanings of what you recite, reflecting on Allah's names and understanding His attributes can transform prayer from repetition into dialogue. The unease is the heart asking to understand what it is saying. Sometimes the invitation is simply to trust the process. Spiritual growth is not linear. There are seasons of sweetness and seasons of dryness. Both are part of the journey. When prayer feels heavy, it does not mean you are moving backward. Often it means you are being strengthened. Allah trains the heart through patience, teaching it to worship not for feelings, but for faith. There are hearts that only seek Allah when they feel peace, but Allah wants hearts that seek Him even in discomfort. When you continue to pray despite restlessness, you are responding to the invitation. You are choosing Allah over ease. This choice, repeated quietly, builds a depth of faith that comfort alone cannot create. Sometimes Allah leaves the restless so that you do not become attached to the feeling of peace instead of the giver of peace. If tranquility came easily every time, hearts might chase the feeling rather than the relationship. Restlessness reminds you that Allah Himself is the goal, not the emotional state that sometimes accompanies worship. The invitation may also be to integrate prayer into your life beyond the prayer mat, to carry remembrance into your day, to let prayer shape your actions, your choices, your character. When there is a gap between worship and life, the heart feels divided. The unease is Allah calling you toward wholeness, toward a life where prayer is not a pause, but a foundation. Sometimes the restlessness is a sign that Allah trusts you with more depth. He does not give heavy hearts to those who cannot carry growth. He stirs the soul because He knows it can respond. The unease is not abandonment, it is attention. When prayer unsettles you, it is often because Allah is closer than you realize. He is not pushing you away, He is pulling you inward. The heart feels restless because it is being asked to let go of what is familiar and step into a more sincere, more present, more trusting connection with its Creator.